When my son died, my pregnant daughter-in-law showed up at the funeral with her mother. She coldly said, "Now that the useless man is gone, you'll transfer his assets to our name." I just smiled and handed her a DNA test. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. My name is Nathan and I'm 62 years old. 3 weeks ago, I buried my only son, Adam. He was 34, healthy as a horse, or so I thought. Heart attack, the doctor said. Sudden cardiac arrest. No warning signs, no family history. Just gone. I stood at his graveside that gray October morning, watching the casket disappear into the earth when my daughter-in-law Stella approached me. She was 5 months pregnant, her belly just starting to show beneath her black dress. But there was something cold in her eyes, something that made my skin crawl. "Nathan," she said, her voice flat and emotionless, "we need to talk." I nodded, assuming she wanted to discuss funeral arrangements or maybe talk about how we'd handle things moving forward. Stella had never been warm toward me, but grief affects people differently. I was willing to give her space to process. What happened next still makes my blood run cold. "Now that the useless one is gone," she said, her voice so casual it sounded like she was discussing the weather, "you're going to transfer all of Adam's assets to our name. The house, the life insurance, his savings account, everything." I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. The useless one. She was talking about my son, her husband, the father of her unborn child, the man we'd just buried 20 minutes ago. Her mother, Patricia, stepped up beside her, nodding in agreement. "It's only right," Patricia said. "Stella's carrying his child. She deserves everything he left behind." I stared at them both, these two women who had just reduced my son to nothing more than a paycheck. Around us, other mourners were quietly paying their respects, completely unaware of the conversation happening right there at the graveside. "Adam had a will," I said slowly, trying to keep my voice steady. "Everything was arranged according to his wishes." Stella laughed, a sharp, bitter sound that cut through the cemetery air. "His will leaves everything to me anyway, but I want it transferred directly. No probate, no delays. I have a baby coming, and I need access to those funds immediately." The way she said it, so matter-of-fact, so entitled, made something snap inside me. This woman had never shown my son genuine love. She'd married him when he got his promotion at the engineering firm, when his salary jumped to $85,000 a year. Before that, when he was struggling to establish himself, she wouldn't even return his calls. "I'm not transferring anything until the proper legal processes are completed," I told her. Patricia stepped closer, her voice low and threatening. "Don't make this difficult, Nathan. Adam's gone. You're an old man with no other family. Stella is all you have left, and she's carrying your grandchild. You don't want to alienate us." That's when I reached into my jacket pocket and pulled out a small envelope. Inside was something I'd been carrying around for 3 days, something that had been eating at me since the moment Adam died. "Actually," I said, handing the envelope to Stella, "I think you should have this." She frowned and opened it. Inside was a DNA test kit, unused, with instructions and a prepaid mailing label. "What is this?" she demanded. I looked directly into her eyes, watching as understanding began to dawn. "It's for when the baby is born, to establish paternity." The color drained from her face. Patricia grabbed the envelope from her daughter's hands, staring at the contents. "How dare you?" Patricia hissed. "How dare you question the legitimacy of that child?" But Stella had gone very quiet. Too quiet. "I'm not questioning anything," I said calmly. "I'm just ensuring that everything is properly documented, for legal purposes, you understand. The thing is, I'd started suspecting something was wrong months ago. Stella's behavior during her pregnancy had been strange. She'd insisted on going to all her doctor's appointments alone, even when Adam offered to accompany her. She'd become secretive about her phone calls, always stepping outside when certain numbers appeared on her screen. But it was something else that really got my attention. 2 weeks before Adam died, he'd called me late at night. His voice was shaky, different. "Dad," he'd said, "I need to ask you something, and I need you to be honest with me." "What is it, son?" "When you and Mom were trying to have kids, how long did it take?" The question caught me off guard. "About 18 months. Why?" There was a long pause. "Stella got pregnant immediately. Like, immediately. The first month we started trying." "Sometimes that happens, Adam. You were both young and healthy." "No, Dad. I mean, the exact timing was strange. She told me she was pregnant the day after I told her about my promotion. The day after I mentioned how much my salary would increase. That conversation haunted me for weeks. Adam sounded troubled, suspicious, but before I could talk to him about it properly, he was gone. Now, standing at his graveside, watching Stella clutch that DNA test kit like it was a live grenade, I knew my suspicions were justified. "This is ridiculous," Stella said, but her voice was shaking. "I don't need to prove anything to you." "Then you won't mind taking the test," I replied. Patricia grabbed her daughter's arm. "We're leaving. This conversation is over." As they walked away, I heard Stella whisper urgently to her mother, but I couldn't make out the words. What I could see was the panic in her movements. The way she kept looking back at me with something that looked very much like fear. I stood there for a long time after they left, staring at Adam's grave. The weather was getting colder, and most of the other mourners had already gone home. But I couldn't bring myself to leave. Not yet. You see, what Stella didn't know is that I'd already had my suspicions confirmed. What she didn't know is that I'd been investigating for months, ever since Adam started asking those strange questions. What she didn't know is that I already knew the truth about her pregnancy, about her marriage to my son, about everything. But what she really didn't know is that I'd been planning for this moment for weeks, and that DNA test kit was just the beginning. The first time I really noticed something was off with Stella was about 6 months ago, during what should have been a happy family dinner. Adam had invited me over to celebrate the news of the pregnancy, and I was genuinely excited to become a grandfather. I remember walking into their house that evening, carrying a bottle of sparkling cider and a small gift I'd picked up for the baby. The house was beautiful, a 4-bedroom colonial that Adam had purchased after his promotion. Everything was perfectly decorated, exactly the kind of home Stella had always talked about wanting. "Congratulations," I said, hugging them both. "This is wonderful news." Adam was beaming, absolutely glowing with excitement. He kept talking about cribs and college funds and how he wanted to be the kind of father who was involved in everything. But Stella seemed distant, almost uncomfortable with the attention. "How far along are you?" I asked her. 8 weeks, she replied quickly, then immediately changed the subject to the renovations they were planning for the nursery. It was a small thing, but it stuck with me. 8 weeks meant she would have gotten pregnant in late January. I knew this because Adam had mentioned to me in early February that they were going to start trying for a baby soon. The timeline didn't quite add up, but I pushed the thought away. Sometimes these things happen unexpectedly. Over the following weeks, I started noticing other things. Stella would get strange phone calls during family gatherings, always stepping outside to take them. When Adam asked who it was, she'd say it was her doctor or her sister or a friend from work. But there was something secretive about the way she handled these calls, something that didn't sit right with me. Then there was the way she talked about the baby. Most expectant mothers I'd known were excited to discuss every detail, to share ultrasound photos, to plan and dream about the future. Stella seemed almost detached from the whole experience. She'd answer questions when asked, but she never volunteered information or seemed particularly interested in baby preparations. The real turning point came in late spring. I was visiting Adam one Saturday afternoon, helping him install a ceiling fan in what would become the nursery. Stella was out shopping with her mother, so it was just the two of us working together. "Dad," Adam said suddenly, "can I ask you something personal?" "Of course." He was quiet for a moment, focusing intently on the wiring. "How did you know Mom was the right person for you?" The question surprised me. Adam had been with Stella for 3 years, married for 2. They seemed happy together, or at least I thought they did. "I guess I knew because being with her felt natural," I said. "We wanted the same things, we enjoyed each other's company, we supported each other's dreams. Why do you ask?" He didn't answer right away. We worked in silence for several minutes before he finally spoke again. "Sometimes I feel like Stella and I want different things, like we're not quite on the same page about important stuff." "Such as?" "Well, like this baby. I'm excited about it, but sometimes I get the feeling that she's not as happy about it as she pretends to be. And lately, she's been acting strange, secretive." I stopped what I was doing and looked at him. "Strange how?" "She's been getting a lot of phone calls that she won't take in front of me. She's been going out more often, always with explanations that don't quite add up. And last week, I saw her delete a bunch of text messages right after I walked into the room." My stomach tightened. "Have you talked to her about it?" "I tried. She says I'm being paranoid, that pregnancy is stressful and she needs space to process everything. But Dad, it's more than that. She's been cold toward me, distant, like she's here physically but not really present." I didn't know what to say. Part of me wanted to tell him he was probably overthinking things, that pregnancy could affect women in different ways. But another part of me had been noticing the same things he was describing. "Trust your instincts, son," I said finally. "If something feels wrong, there's usually a reason for it." A few weeks later, Adam called me late one night. His voice was shaky, and I could tell he'd been drinking. "Dad, I think Stella might be seeing someone else." My heart sank. "What makes you think that?" "I followed her today. I know it sounds crazy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going on. She said she was going to a prenatal appointment, but when I called the doctor's office, they said she didn't have an appointment scheduled." "Where did she go?" "To a coffee shop across town. She met a man there. They talked for over an hour, and Dad, the way they were sitting together, the way they were looking at each other, it wasn't the way you talk to a friend or a colleague." I felt sick. "Did you recognize him?" "No, but he was young, maybe around Stella's age. Dark hair, well dressed. They seemed very comfortable with each other, like they'd done this before." "What did you do?" "Nothing. I sat in my car and watched them until they left separately. Then I went home and pretended I didn't know anything. I don't know what else to do." We talked for another hour that night. I advised him to be careful, to gather more information before confronting her, to protect himself legally and emotionally. I also suggested he might want to consider a paternity test after the baby was born, just to be sure. "You really think she'd do that?" he asked. "You think she'd try to pass off another man's child as mine?" "I don't know, Adam. I hope not. But given everything you've told me, I think it's worth considering." The conversation ended with him promising to be more observant, to document anything suspicious, and to keep me informed. I spent the rest of that night lying awake, worried about my son and angry at the situation he was in. Over the next few weeks, Adam's suspicions seemed to be confirmed. He discovered more mysterious phone calls, more unexplained absences, more secretive behavior. He started taking photos of text messages before Stella could delete them, and what he found was devastating. The messages were flirtatious, intimate, clearly romantic in nature. They were from someone named Marcus, and it was obvious that Stella had been involved with him for months, possibly even before she got pregnant. 2 weeks before Adam died, he called me with the most disturbing news yet. "Dad, I hired a private investigator." "What did you find out?" "Stella's been seeing this Marcus guy for over a year. The investigator followed them to a hotel 3 different times. And Dad, the timing of when they first got together matches exactly with when she would have gotten pregnant." I felt like the world was crashing down around us. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to confront her. I'm going to demand a paternity test. And if that baby isn't mine, I'm filing for divorce." That was the last real conversation I had with my son. 3 days later, he was dead. The day after Adam's funeral, I went to his house to begin sorting through his belongings. Stella had given me a key months earlier, back when things between us were still civil, and she told me I was welcome to take anything that had sentimental value. What she didn't know was that I was looking for something very specific. The house felt hollow without Adam's presence. His coffee mug was still in the kitchen sink, his jacket hanging on the back of a chair. Stella wasn't there. She'd gone to stay with her mother for a few days, claiming she needed space to grieve. I suspected she was really just avoiding me after our confrontation at the cemetery. I made my way to Adam's home office, a small room on the second floor where he kept his computer and important documents. The desk was neat and organized, exactly the way Adam always kept it. But I knew my son well enough to know that if he was investigating something, he would have hidden the evidence carefully. I started with the obvious places: desk drawers, filing cabinets, the computer. The computer was password protected, but I knew Adam used his birthday combined with mine for most of his passwords. It took me 3 tries, but I finally got in. What I found there made my blood run cold. Adam had created a folder labeled insurance documents, but when I opened it, it contained something entirely different. There were dozens of photographs, screenshots of text messages, detailed notes with dates and times, and a comprehensive timeline of Stella's activities. The photos showed Stella meeting with a man at various locations around the city: coffee shops, restaurants, a hotel parking lot. The man was tall and dark-haired, probably in his early 30s, well-dressed and confident-looking. In some of the photos, they were holding hands. In others, they were kissing. The text message screenshots were even more damning. Conversations between Stella and this Marcus person that went back over a year. Messages that were intimate, romantic, and in some cases explicitly sexual. But it was the dates that really caught my attention. The earliest messages were from 13 months ago, which meant their relationship had started while Stella was still married to Adam. But more importantly, there were several messages from around the time Stella would have gotten pregnant. One message from Marcus, dated late January, read, "Can't wait to see you tonight. Hope your husband doesn't suspect anything." Stella's response, "He's working late again. He never pays attention to what I'm doing anyway." Another exchange from early February was even more revealing. Marcus, "Are you sure about this plan? It seems risky." Stella, "It's perfect timing. Adam just got promoted and his salary jumped to $85,000. Plus, there's the life insurance policy worth $200,000. If I'm pregnant with his child, I'm set for life." Marcus, "But what if he finds out?" Stella won't. He's too trusting. And even if he does, what's he going to do? Demand a paternity test? I'll just tell him he's being paranoid and controlling. I stared at the screen, feeling sick to my stomach. This wasn't just an affair. This was a calculated plan to trap my son in a marriage and steal his money using another man's child. But the worst was yet to come. I found a folder labeled Legal Research that contained screenshots of various websites about paternity laws, inheritance rights, and life insurance policies. Stella had been researching exactly what she would be entitled to if Adam died, and how to ensure she would inherit everything even if the child wasn't his. She'd even looked up information about how to contest a will and what rights she would have as a surviving spouse. There were bookmarked pages about sudden cardiac arrest and stress-related heart problems in young men. My hands were shaking as I continued reading. Adam had documented everything meticulously. He'd hired a private investigator named Robert Chin who had provided detailed reports about Stella's activities. According to these reports, Stella had been meeting with Marcus regularly for over a year, and they'd been seen together at a hotel at least 8 times. But the most devastating piece of evidence was a medical report that Adam had somehow obtained. It showed that Marcus had undergone fertility testing 6 months earlier, and the results indicated he had an unusually high sperm count and excellent fertility markers. The timing suggested that Stella and Marcus had been planning this pregnancy deliberately. There was also a handwritten note from Adam dated just 1 week before his death. Dad was right. I should have trusted my instincts months ago. Preserve the original language of the text. The baby isn't mine. I'm almost certain of it. Marcus is the father, and they've been planning this whole thing to steal my money. I'm going to confront her tomorrow night. I'm going to demand she take a paternity test, and if she refuses, I'm filing for divorce immediately. I can't live this lie anymore. I sat back in the chair, feeling like the room was spinning around me. Adam had known. He'd figured it all out, and he was planning to confront Stella about it. But before he could do that, he was dead. I kept searching through the files and found something that made my blood freeze. Adam had been experiencing chest pains and anxiety attacks for weeks before his death. He'd seen a doctor about it, and the medical notes indicated that he was suffering from severe stress and depression related to marital problems. The doctor had prescribed anxiety medication and had recommended counseling. But Adam had been reluctant to take the medication because he was worried about how it might affect his ability to think clearly during the confrontation with Stella. There was an email exchange between Adam and his doctor from just 3 days before he died. Adam: the chest pains are getting worse. I can barely sleep. I keep having panic attacks thinking about what I need to do. Doctor: Adam, you need to take the medication I prescribed. This level of stress is dangerous for your cardiovascular system. Young men can have heart attacks from severe emotional trauma. Adam: I can't take anything that might cloud my judgment. I need to be sharp when I talk to my wife. There's too much at stake. Doctor: please reconsider. What you're describing sounds like extreme psychological distress. Your body can't handle this level of stress indefinitely. The final email from Adam was sent the night before he died. I think I'm going to confront her tonight. I can't wait any longer. This is killing me. I stared at that last sentence, the horrible irony of it hitting me like a physical blow. This wasn't just a figure of speech. The stress of discovering his wife's betrayal had literally been killing my son. I found one more folder, labeled Insurance and Legal Documents. Inside were copies of Adam's life insurance policy, his will, and various other financial documents. But there was also something else, a draft of a new will that Adam had apparently been working on. In this new will, Stella was completely removed as a beneficiary. Instead, everything was to be left to me, with instructions that if Stella was pregnant at the time of his death, a paternity test should be performed before any financial support was provided for the child. The draft was dated 2 days before Adam died, but it was never finalized or legally executed. I spent the rest of the afternoon going through Adam's belongings, but my mind was reeling from what I'd discovered. My son hadn't died of natural causes. He died because the woman he loved and trusted had systematically destroyed him from the inside out. The stress of discovering her betrayal, the anxiety of planning a confrontation, the devastation of realizing that everything he'd believed about his marriage was a lie, it had all combined to put an unbearable strain on his heart. As I packed up Adam's computer and all the evidence he'd gathered, I realized something else. Stella thought she'd gotten away with it. She thought Adam had died before he could expose her, and now she was free to claim everything he'd worked for. But what she didn't know was that Adam had shared his suspicions with me. What she didn't know was that all of his evidence was now in my hands. And what she definitely didn't know was that I had been conducting my own investigation for weeks, building on the foundation that Adam had started. 3 days after I discovered Adam's hidden files, Stella called me. Her voice was different now, less hostile than it had been at the funeral, but there was an underlying tension that I could hear clearly. "Nathan," she said, "I think we got off on the wrong foot the other day. I was grieving, and I said some things I didn't mean. Can we meet somewhere and talk?" I knew exactly what this was about. She was worried about that DNA test kit I'd given her, and she wanted to gauge how serious I was about using it. What she didn't know was that I already had all the answers I needed. "Of course," I said. "Where would you like to meet?" "How about that little diner on Maple Street, the one Adam used to like? Tomorrow at 2 o'clock? The choice of location was clearly calculated. She was trying to use emotional manipulation, reminding me of Adam's favorite place in hopes that it would make me more sympathetic to her situation. But after everything I'd learned, her tactics just made me angrier. I arrived at the diner 15 minutes early and chose a booth in the back corner where we could have privacy. The place was mostly empty except for a few elderly customers and a waitress who looked like she'd been working there for decades. Stella arrived exactly on time, and I was struck by how different she looked. Gone was the cold, calculating woman from the funeral. Instead, she'd carefully crafted an image of a grieving widow. She wore a simple black dress, minimal makeup, and had styled her hair in a way that made her look vulnerable and tired. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the booth across from me. "I know things have been difficult between us." I nodded, but didn't say anything. I wanted to see how she would play this. "I want to apologize for what I said at the cemetery," she continued. "I was in shock, and I wasn't thinking clearly. Losing Adam has been devastating for me." The performance was impressive. I had to give her that. If I didn't know what I knew, I might have been fooled by the tremor in her voice and the way she dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. "I understand," I said carefully. "Grief affects people in different ways." She leaned forward slightly, placing her hands on the table. "The thing is, Nathan, I'm scared. I'm 28 years old, I'm pregnant, and I just lost my husband. I don't know how I'm going to manage financially, especially with a baby coming." Here it was, the real reason for this meeting. "Adam had life insurance," I said, "and he left everything to you in his will." "Yes, but you know how these things work. It could take months for the insurance to pay out, and the probate process can be complicated. I need to know that you're going to support me during this difficult time." I took a sip of my coffee, studying her face. She was good at this, I had to admit. The slight tremor in her voice, the way she positioned herself to look small and helpless, the careful choice of words designed to make me feel guilty if I didn't help her. "What kind of support are you looking for?" I asked. "Well, you know, Adam always talked about how close you two were. He said you'd always been there for him, that you'd do anything to help your family." She paused, letting that sink in. "I was hoping you might be willing to help me with some of the immediate expenses. Maybe take care of the mortgage payments for a few months until the insurance comes through." The mortgage on their house was $2,800 a month. She was asking me to pay over $8,000 while she waited for her fraudulent claim to be processed. "That's quite a bit of money," I said. "I know, and I wouldn't ask if I had any other choice. But you're all the family I have left now. You're the only person who can help me." Another calculated move. She was trying to make me feel responsible for her welfare, to guilt me into believing that I owed her something because she was carrying what she claimed was my grandchild. "What about your mother?" I asked. "Couldn't she help you?" Stella's expression flickered for just a moment, a flash of irritation that she quickly covered. "Mom's on a fixed income. She can't afford to help with something like this." I nodded thoughtfully, as if I was seriously considering her request. "You know, Stella, I've been thinking a lot about what you said at the funeral, about wanting to make sure everything is properly documented." She tensed slightly. "What do you mean?" "Well, you mentioned transferring Adam's assets. If I'm going to be providing financial support, I think it would be wise to make sure all the legal aspects are handled correctly." "Of course," she said, but her voice had gotten a little tighter. "For instance, that DNA test I gave you. I think it would be a good idea to establish paternity as soon as the baby is born." "For legal purposes, you understand." The color drained from her face. "Nathan, I can't believe you're still bringing that up. It's insulting to suggest that Adam might not be the father." "I'm not suggesting anything," I said calmly. "I'm just being practical. These days, it's standard procedure in situations like this. The insurance company might even require it before they pay out the life insurance benefit." That was a lie, but I wanted to see how she would react. "I don't think that's true," she said, but I could hear the uncertainty in her voice. "Maybe not," I said. But it couldn't hurt to be prepared. After all, if Adam is the father, the test will confirm it, and then there won't be any questions. Stella was quiet for a long moment, staring down at her hands. When she looked up, there was something different in her eyes. The vulnerable act was slipping. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Why are you trying to make this more difficult than it needs to be?" "I'm not trying to make anything difficult. I'm trying to protect Adam's interests." "Adam is dead," she said, her voice harder now. "His interests don't matter anymore." And there it was. The mask had slipped completely, revealing the cold, calculating woman underneath. "His interests matter to me," I said. "And if that baby is really his child, then protecting that child's interests matters too." She stared at me for a moment, and I could see her trying to decide how to handle this. Finally, she leaned back in the booth and crossed her arms. "Fine," she said. "You want a paternity test? We'll do a paternity test. But I want it documented that you demanded this, because when it proves that Adam is the father, I'm going to make sure everyone knows how you treated me during the worst time of my life." I almost smiled. She was still trying to manipulate me, still trying to make me feel guilty. But she'd also just agreed to the test, which meant she was either incredibly confident in her deception or she was planning something else. "That's perfectly fair," I said. "I'll arrange for the test to be done by an independent laboratory, and we'll both get copies of the results." "Fine," she said again, but her hands were trembling slightly as she reached for her purse. "There's just one more thing," I said, pulling out my phone. "Before we move forward with any financial arrangements, I think you should know that I've been doing some research of my own." Her face went completely white. "What kind of research?" I opened the photo gallery on my phone and turned it toward her. The first image was one of Adam's photographs, showing her and Marcus holding hands outside a coffee shop. She stared at the photo for several seconds, her mouth slightly open. "Where did you get this?" "Adam was investigating you for months before he died," I said, swiping to the next photo. "He hired a private investigator. He documented everything." The second photo showed her and Marcus kissing in a hotel parking lot. "This is ridiculous," she said, but her voice was shaking. "This doesn't prove anything." "Doesn't it?" I swiped to a screenshot of one of her text messages. "What about this conversation with Marcus where you discuss your plan to get pregnant and secure Adam's money?" She grabbed for my phone, but I pulled it away. "You can't have those," she said desperately. "Those are private." "Not anymore, they're not. Adam made copies of everything before he died. Every text message, every photograph, every piece of evidence that proves you've been lying to him for over a year." She was crying now, but these weren't tears of grief or remorse. These were tears of panic, the tears of someone who realized their carefully laid plans were falling apart. "What do you want?" she whispered. I put my phone away and looked directly into her eyes. "I want you to know that I know exactly who you are and what you've done. And I want you to understand that you're not going to get away with it." Stella sat across from me in that diner booth, her face pale and streaked with tears. But I wasn't finished, not even close. "You want to know what really happened to my son?" I asked, my voice steady but filled with a cold anger that had been building for weeks. She didn't answer. She just stared at me with wide, frightened eyes. I pulled out a folder I'd been carrying and set it on the table between us. "Adam didn't die of natural causes, Stella. He died because of what you did to him." "That's not true," she whispered. "He had a heart attack. The doctor said..." "The doctor said he had sudden cardiac arrest, but they didn't know about the stress you'd been putting him under for months." I opened the folder and pulled out the first document. This is a report from Adam's doctor, dated 2 weeks before he died. It shows that he'd been experiencing severe anxiety, chest pains, and panic attacks. Her hands were shaking as she looked at the medical report. "Adam was a healthy 34-year-old man," I continued. "He exercised regularly, ate well, had no family history of heart disease. But stress can kill, Stella. Psychological trauma can put so much strain on the cardiovascular system that it causes the heart to stop." I pulled out another document. This is an email exchange between Adam and his doctor. Read it." She took the papers with trembling hands, scanning the conversation where Adam described his symptoms and his doctor warned him about the dangers of severe emotional stress. "He was dying slowly for weeks," I said, watching her face as she read. "Every day that he suspected you were cheating, every night that he lay awake wondering if the baby was his. Every moment that he spent questioning whether his entire marriage was a lie, it was all putting unbearable pressure on his heart." Stella set the papers down, her breathing shallow. "I never meant for anything to happen to him." "Didn't you?" I pulled out another document. "This is a copy of your internet search history from Adam's computer. He found it before he died." Her face went white as she looked at the printout. There, in black and white, were searches for heart attack symptoms in young men, stress-related cardiac arrest, and sudden death from emotional trauma. "You were researching how stress could kill him," I said. "You knew what you were doing." "That's not what that means," she said desperately. "I was just worried about him. I noticed he seemed stressed and I was trying to understand what might be wrong." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Really? Because according to the timestamps on these searches, you were looking up information about stress-related heart problems at the same time you were sending romantic text messages to Marcus." I showed her another printout. "Here's a text you sent to Marcus on the same day you searched for information about cardiac arrest. Adam's been having chest pains lately. I think the stress of suspecting something is getting to him. This might solve our problem without us having to do anything." The blood drained completely from her face. She tried to speak, but no words came out. "You knew he was dying," I said, my voice getting harder. "You knew the stress was killing him, and instead of stopping what you were doing, instead of being honest with him, you kept pushing him toward the breaking point." "I never wanted him to die," she finally managed to say. "But you didn't want him to live either, did you? Because a living Adam who knew the truth would have divorced you and left you with nothing. A dead Adam who never had the chance to change his will would leave you everything, including a $200,000 life insurance policy." I pulled out the final piece of evidence, Adam's last journal entry, written the night before he died. "Adam kept a journal," I said. "This is what he wrote on his last night alive. I can't take this anymore. The chest pains are getting worse, and I feel like I'm having a heart attack every time I think about confronting Stella. I know she's cheating. I know the baby probably isn't mine. But I also know that if I confront her, it might kill me. The stress of this situation is literally destroying my body. I don't know what to do." Stella was sobbing now, but I felt no sympathy for her. "He died that same night," I continued, "alone in his bed, while you were supposedly staying at your mother's house. But we both know where you really were, don't we?" She looked up at me through her tears. "How could you possibly know where I was?" I smiled coldly. "Because I've been investigating you too, Stella. I hired the same private investigator that Adam used. Robert Chen is very thorough." I pulled out a photograph showing Stella and Marcus entering a hotel together on the night Adam died. "You were with Marcus when my son's heart finally gave out from the stress you'd put him under. You were in a hotel room with your lover while your husband was dying alone, calling out for help that never came." The photograph showed a timestamp, 11:47 p.m. According to the coroner's report, Adam had died sometime between midnight and 1 a.m. "The neighbor heard him calling for help," I said. "Mrs. Patterson from next door. She told the police she heard someone shouting around midnight, but she thought it was just the television. She didn't realize it was Adam having a heart attack." Stella was hyperventilating now, her face buried in her hands. "If you had been home, like a real wife should have been, you could have called 911. You could have saved his life. But you were too busy celebrating your freedom with Marcus to care about the man whose money you were planning to steal." I gathered up all the documents and put them back in the folder. "So no, Stella, Adam didn't die of natural causes. He died because you systematically destroyed him emotionally and psychologically until his body couldn't take it anymore. You may not have put a gun to his head, but you killed him just as surely as if you had." She looked up at me with mascara running down her cheeks. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to make sure you don't profit from murdering my son," I said. "I didn't murder anyone," she said desperately. "I never touched him. I never hurt him physically." "No, you did something worse. You broke his heart and his spirit until there was nothing left of him. You took a good man who loved you and trusted you, and you destroyed him piece by piece until his body gave up." I stood up from the booth, looking down at her. "You asked me at the funeral to transfer Adam's assets to you. You demanded his house, his life insurance, his savings. You wanted everything he worked for." "I'm carrying his child," she said weakly. "No, you're carrying Marcus's child, and we both know it." I dropped one final document on the table. It was a copy of a text message from Marcus to Stella, sent just 3 days after Adam's funeral. "Can't wait to meet our son. Hope he looks like me and not like that sucker Adam." Stella stared at the message, her last hope of maintaining her lie crumbling before her eyes. "The DNA test you agreed to take isn't just going to prove that Adam isn't the father," I said. "It's going to prove that you've been planning this deception for over a year, and when that happens, you're going to lose everything." I turned to leave, but then stopped and looked back at her one more time. "You know what the worst part is, Stella? Adam really loved you. Even when he suspected you were cheating, even when he was dying from the stress of your betrayal, he still hoped he was wrong about you. He died hoping that maybe, somehow, you really did love him back." She was crying so hard now that she could barely breathe. "But you never loved him, did you? You just saw dollar signs. And now that he's gone, you thought you could cash in on his death and live happily ever after with Marcus." I leaned down close to her ear and whispered the words that I knew would haunt her forever. Adam's last words, according to the paramedics who found him, were, "Tell Stella I forgive her. Even dying, even knowing what you'd done to him, he forgave you. But I never will." 2 weeks after my confrontation with Stella at the diner, I received a call from Robert Chen, the private investigator. His voice was calm and professional, but I could hear the satisfaction in it. "Nathan, I have some news. The DNA test results came back." I was sitting in my living room, looking at a photograph of Adam from his college graduation. He looked so young and hopeful in that picture, so full of dreams for the future. A future that Stella had stolen from him. "What do they say?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. 0% probability that Adam is the father. The child Stella is carrying has no genetic connection to your son whatsoever. Even though I'd expected this result, hearing it confirmed still hit me like a physical blow. This meant that everything Adam had suspected was true. Stella had been planning to pass off another man's child as his from the very beginning. "There's more," Robert continued. "I was able to obtain a sample from Marcus Williams. That's the biological father's full name, and the DNA test confirms he's the father with 99.9% certainty." I closed my eyes, feeling a mixture of vindication and sadness. Adam had been right about everything. "I've also completed the additional investigation you requested," Robert said. "The evidence package is quite comprehensive. Financial records showing that Stella has been receiving money from Marcus for months, hotel receipts, phone records, everything documented with timestamps and locations." "Thank you, Robert. Please send everything to my attorney." After I hung up, I sat for a long time in the silence of my house. Tomorrow, I would put the final phase of my plan into action. Tonight, I wanted to remember my son. The next morning, I drove to the law office of Margaret Torres, the attorney I'd hired to handle Adam's estate. Margaret was a sharp woman in her 50s who specialized in inheritance disputes and fraud cases. When I'd first contacted her 3 weeks ago, she'd been skeptical about my claims. Now, with all the evidence laid out on her desk, she was furious. "This is one of the most calculated cases of inheritance fraud I've ever seen," she said, flipping through the documents. The level of premeditation here is staggering. What are our options? I asked. Well, first, we filed to contest the will based on fraud, since Stella obtained her inheritance through deception, specifically by claiming to be carrying Adam's child when she knew she wasn't. The court can void her claims to his assets. Margaret pulled out a legal document she'd prepared. Second, we file a civil lawsuit against her for intentional infliction of emotional distress resulting in wrongful death. While we can't prove she directly caused Adam's heart attack, we can prove that her deliberate actions created the psychological stress that contributed to his death. What about the life insurance? That's the best part. Life insurance companies take fraud very seriously. When we present them with evidence that Stella's entire claim is based on a false premise, that she was carrying the insured's child, they'll not only deny her claim, they'll likely pursue criminal charges against her for insurance fraud. I felt a grim satisfaction hearing this. Stella had thought she was so clever, so careful in her planning, but she'd made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated how much Adam meant to me, and how far I was willing to go to protect his memory. How long will this take? I asked. Given the strength of our evidence, probably 3 to 6 months. Stella can fight it, but she'll lose. The DNA evidence alone is enough to destroy her case, and everything else just makes it worse for her. 3 days later, Margaret called to tell me that Stella had been served with the legal papers. According to the process server, she'd collapsed when she realized what was happening. Her mother had to help her to a chair while she read through the documents detailing how thoroughly her deception had been exposed. But the real satisfaction came a week after that. I was having coffee at a small cafe near my house when my phone rang. It was Stella, and she was crying so hard I could barely understand her. "Nathan, please," she sobbed, "you have to stop this. You're destroying my life." "I'm not destroying anything," I said calmly. "I'm just making sure the truth comes out. The insurance company froze all the accounts. I can't access any of Adam's money. I can't pay the mortgage on the house. They're going to foreclose." I felt no sympathy for her. You should have thought about that before you decided to build your future on lies. "I'm pregnant. I have nowhere to go. Marcus won't return my calls. I think he's scared about the legal trouble." Of course he was. Marcus had been perfectly happy to help Stella cheat on her husband and planned to steal his money, but the moment real consequences appeared, he'd abandoned her. These people always showed their true colors when things got difficult. "That's not my problem, Stella." "Please," she begged. "I'll do anything. I'll disappear. I'll move far away and never bother you again. Just drop the lawsuit." "No." "Why are you doing this to me? I made mistakes, but I never meant for Adam to die." I felt my anger flare up again. "You made mistakes? Stella, you systematically destroyed my son's life for over a year. You cheated on him, lied to him, stole from him, and drove him to an early grave. Those weren't mistakes, those were choices." She was quiet for a moment, then said in a small voice, "I did love him, you know, in the beginning." "No, you didn't. If you had loved him, you never could have done what you did. Love doesn't plan to steal someone's money. Love doesn't cheat and lie and manipulate. Love doesn't research how to give someone a heart attack." "I never researched that," she said desperately. "Yes, you did. We have your browser history, remember? You looked up information about stress-related cardiac events while you were actively causing Adam stress. You knew what you were doing." The line went quiet for several seconds. When she spoke again, her voice was different, harder. "You think you're so righteous, don't you? You think you're the perfect father, protecting your son's memory. But where were you when he needed you? Where were you when he was suffering?" I'd been expecting this attack, this attempt to shift blame onto me. "I was exactly where Adam needed me to be," I said. "He came to me when he started having suspicions. He shared his concerns with me. I advised him to trust his instincts and protect himself. The only reason I have all this evidence is because Adam documented everything and shared it with me before he died. If you knew what was happening, why didn't you stop it? Because Adam was an adult who had to make his own decisions about his marriage. I couldn't force him to leave you, even though I wish I had. She was crying again now. I'm going to lose everything. The house, the money, everything. Good. You don't deserve any of it. What about the baby? You're punishing an innocent child. The baby will be fine. Marcus is the father, so Marcus can take responsibility for his child. That's what fathers do. They take care of their children instead of running away when things get complicated. Marcus is gone. He moved back to California. He won't even answer my calls. I almost laughed at the irony. Stella had destroyed her marriage, killed her husband, and lost everything. And the man she'd done it all for had abandoned her the moment she needed him. Then I guess you should have chosen more carefully, I said. 6 months later, it was all over. The court had ruled in our favor on every count. Stella's claims to Adam's inheritance were voided due to fraud. The life insurance company not only denied her claim, but had referred the case to the district attorney for criminal prosecution. She'd lost the house to foreclosure and had moved back in with her mother. Most importantly, Adam's assets were transferred to a trust that I had established in his name. The money would go to fund scholarships for engineering students, ensuring that Adam's memory would live on by helping other young people achieve their dreams. I was sitting in Adam's favorite restaurant, the place where we used to have dinner every Sunday when he was alive. I'd started coming here once a month, ordering his favorite meal and thinking about the conversations we used to have. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. When I opened it, I saw a single line. I hope you're happy. You destroyed my life. It was from Stella, though she was using a different phone number now. Probably because her service had been shut off when she couldn't pay the bill. I stared at the message for a long time, then typed back, I didn't destroy your life. You destroyed your own life when you chose to destroy my son's. I never heard from her again. A year later, I attended the first Adam Mitchell Memorial Scholarship Ceremony. 20 students had received scholarships to study engineering, funded by the money that Stella had tried to steal. As I watched these young people accept their awards, I felt something I hadn't experienced since Adam died: peace. My son was gone, and nothing would ever bring him back. But his death hadn't been in vain. Stella hadn't profited from her cruelty, and Adam's memory was being honored in a way that would help others for years to come. I kept the DNA test results in a frame on my desk, not as a trophy, but as a reminder. A reminder that the truth always comes out eventually, and that love, real love, means protecting the people you care about even after they're gone. Especially after they're gone.